I'm with you. I mean, so much stuff has to happen in the macro environment in the United States in particular in the next quarter, this final quarter, including September, that we're going to see things change. I mean, like you just talked about the rate cuts and stuff like that. So it's probably a good time to transition into that. And yeah, maybe it is people just with some trepidation, like waiting to see what happens. Will the actual, the Fed cutting rates lead to the spending again? Like, will that start it up and the money printing and things like that? Certainly the incumbent which I guess is Kamala Harris, even though she's not the president, but the incumbent administration, the people in power, the Democrats are going to want things to look as good as humanly possible before the election here. But looking at the Fed, so interesting point. Did you have any final thoughts kind of on the charts or anything there? Because
no, I didn't know if you wanted to look at the pulse prices first or wait.
Oh, well, let's just talk this Fed thing real quick, and then we'll just get to the pulse prices.
Get rid of this.
That'll be its own thing, kind of. So, Jerome Powell said last week. So he said the time has come for policy to adjust. We don't seek or welcome further labor market cooling. My confidence has grown that inflation is on its path to 2%. He's not going to say stuff like that unless they're probably pivoting. Like, I mean, the entire time, like Ewok and I were both here. Many of you guys were probably here over the last, since early 2022 when all this disastrous market shit was happening. When they were hiking rates, he would be he would never give any indication of anything bullish whatsoever. I mean, like he tries to be as careful as humanly possible. So for him to actually come out and say, my confidence has grown that inflation is on its path to 2%. Now, yeah, he's saying it's just on the path. Doesn't that mean maybe they could still just hold rates? Possibly, but with the disaster that we saw that we already talked about on this show tonight back in early August and the stuff going on with Japan and all over the world, I think we're pretty much guaranteed to see rate cuts here finally. And the debate hasn't turned into will there be rate cuts at the September meeting? Will it be 25 or 50 points, with 25 last I looked being the overwhelming favorite. So I know Ewok, you've been thinking before they weren't going to cut rates at that meeting. All signs, including from Jerome Powell, seem to be that they're going to. And I do wonder, we've talked about it many times. Many people have. When the Fed pivots traditionally, you do see on average, I think it was like a 28% drawdown in the stock market over time. Now, that takes months to play out. We're not saying that they're going to cut interest rates by a quarter of a basis point in September and everything's going to tank. It's not going to be like that. But with him doing it that slowly and kind of casually moving along, if it's 25 kind of per meeting, we should still have plenty of room for bullish sentiment for quite some time here if they're just kind of doing it like that. And then we will eventually see the drawdown that may come with that. But what do you kind of make of his comments? I mean, are you convinced that they are going to be cutting rates at least here in September? And then we can kind of talk about just quickly like the rest of the events, including the election, that's going to influence this stuff too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, everything is pointing to them doing it. However, I think they still need to be strategic about it, right? As you said, when there's a decent sized pivot or a rate cut, traditionally it's 32 or 34% average drop in the markets. Everything kind of has that correction, and it does take off after that. But I don't think the timing of it would be good for elections. So they do kind of need to protect that at the same time. So they're going to have to tread very lightly. That's what leads me to believe it will only be 25 points, rather than 50. But if they go at it hard and heavy, I think it could have an unfortunate, repercussion from it. I think it would definitely hurt the markets going right into election. I mean, I think it's between 45 days on average is when it kind of takes that turn, and that puts you right at the beginning of November. So I just think they definitely need to be careful about it. I think they'll do 25 and just kind of ease their way into it.
Yeah, looking at the meeting date, so it's September 17th and 18th, and then actually, uncanny. So the following FMC meeting after September is November 6th and 7th. That's the 2 days after the election, if memory serves. I think the election is November 5th. So there's only going to be one meeting prior to the election. So they don't meet in October, and then it'll be right. Yep, Tuesday the 5th is the election. So boom. I mean, yeah, I think if they do the 25 basis points in September, you're not going to see anything but positive repercussions in the market. So I think they're totally fine with that. Then, whether they swindle an election again or something like that, we're going to see what they'll do on the 6th and 7th, or if, it's doomsday for them and, Trump does win with RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and this army that he's building behind him. So we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, I'm bullish about that either way for us. I don't really care about, politics that much, but I mean, the fact that we could just get a modest rate cut in September and then there's no meeting until after the election and then we can deal with all that other stuff later, I think that's terrific.
Yep.
And then what do you make of the impact of the election? I mean, like, I don't want to get too far into that. We've talked enough about that on this show. And again, the long-term effects of whoever wins, matters obviously, but, what do you think? We have had some winds of change here in the last couple of weeks since you and I have talked. I mean, we are seeing this coalition of like former Democrats, kind of people that are in the middle, that most of like regular America who isn't married to any extreme side backs. Like a lot of people down the middle have no problem at all with Tulsi Gabbard. I've been a fan of her since she was a Democrat, honestly. RFK has won the hearts of many. I mean, he does still have some liberal policies, but he makes a lot of sense on a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. And for those two heavyweights to throw their support behind Trump, I think especially RFK, like, because he was literally running for president. Yeah, I think speaks volumes. And I mean, I don't know. I know the polling, I think it's pretty much wipe your ass with any poll that you see. But, clearly you guys will be able to deduce who we are voting for. But what do you think? I mean, does that stuff make a difference? And do you think maybe enough middle America, I don't mean middle of the country, but like middle of the road politics in America, people may be swaying towards Trump that may not have previously?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are fans of a lot of those people that may not have voted for Trump. Now they see that these folks are getting behind him. At the very least, it may have them take another look, get another opinion or read something other than, your CNN stuff that's put out. Because obviously we know the media definitely plays sides, right? They'll talking points for one side, but not the other. And then, and then Fox News kind of does it the other way around. So it may at least open people up to taking a better look, taking a closer look. I mean, what still concerns me are the illegals crossing the border and having them registered to vote. I know there's a lot of states where these people are turning up on voter registration rolls that shouldn't be. They're registering at a processing center. They're using that as an address. They're all using a very similar social security number. And I know in Alabama or Mississippi, I forget where it was, there was a town where 4,000 or 5,000 of them were just removed from the voter registration rolls or lists or whatever they are. Because they were found on there and they shouldn't have been. So,
right.
I just worry that's why the border hasn't been closed. I worry that, they're getting them in somehow and getting them on these rosters that they shouldn't be. And, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed quickly, but because we are approaching that date. So, yeah, I mean, I could totally see a steal happening again. I mean, they're 16 out of the last 20 years have been held by Democrats, and yet they still blame 4 years of Trump, all the problems on his 4 years. So it's just funny. I've always been a middle of the road kind of guy with as far as policies go.
Well, I bet 20 years ago you would have considered yourself a Democrat. Maybe because I did when I was
10 years ago. I would have. It's only
10,
recent
15,
that it's only recently that I've actually changed my registration. So I mean, so is what it is. We don't like to get into that too heavily, but
well, I think I'm just saying. The only reason I didn't mean to call you out, but I mean I can say that about myself, and I think a lot of our peers feel the same way, which is the only reason I said it. I think a lot of people, like in our kind of age group and stuff like that, and maybe a lot of people that have just lived over the last 15 years have had that change where they don't feel like they have shifted that much ideologically. And maybe they would have voted for Obama in the first term or something like that. And now they see themselves now and they're like, I can't even imagine myself voting for that party right now.
Right.
That's all I mean by that.
Well, yeah, times have definitely changed, as far as party goes. And speaking of polls, I think one of the most important ones is the Vegas line. That's the one you really want to keep an eye on because, they aren't going to just lose money on purpose. So that poll will switch back and forth as far as the odds go of who's going to win. So if you want to look at a poll that's probably as close to accurate as you can get, that's the one you probably want to take a look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Makes a lot of sense. But either way, I mean, all these things adding up, I mean, really all we care about is, the money printer going back on and being in cryptocurrency. That's really what matters the most. So we think that's going to happen. We're going to see rate cuts likely here in about 3 weeks. And yeah, this election, these debates and stuff coming up, it's just going to be absolute, get your popcorn ready, as T.O. would say back in the day.
Another thing that we don't want is taxing unrealized gains.
That's not going to happen.
Things like that are just ridiculous. And, when you get in the world of crypto and you do find yourself with a little bit of money, the last thing you want to do is approve this whole tax the rich kind of thing. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't go far. And as far as I'm concerned, prices of everything are just out of control, and it all starts with fuel. So if we're not gonna take care of the fuel problem, we're gonna have these high prices of everything for a long, long time.
Well, anybody with a basic understanding of economics, I mean, the whole unrealized gains thing, it's like, do you know what you're going to do to like the stock market and stuff like that? I mean, like, okay, we'll just sell everything then. Like, if you're just going to do that to me anyway, I'll just sell tops all the time and not get back into the market then. I mean, like, it's going to mess up the market so much. I know that's a big headline right now, and we all should pay attention to it. And it's that whole slippery slope with government thing. Like, they take one thing, you never know what they're going to do. I just want to say that I think that's a Kamala talking point to try to, I don't know who she's trying to appeal to with that, frankly. I don't even know who would enjoy that argument, but there's no way that gets through Congress. I don't see any way that would ever happen. I mean, it's just absolutely asinine, although it is, I think, happening in some areas of the world.
Yeah, right now, I think it is too.
Now, it's probably going to ruin their whole economic structure.
Probably. Now, the good thing would be our RH ecosystem, because if you're going to tax unrealized gains, then you've got to tax or get credit for unrealized losses too. So we would all be in good shape, right?
Thank you.
We would definitely take those on our taxes for sure.
Yeah. So there you go. A couple of things to be super bullish about here in the fall. A lot of big things happening in the United States that, we happen to live there, but also, it happens to be one of the biggest countries in the world, and it does have massive reverberations. So